Every few minutes, Phillips would send me to the captain with little messages, merely telling how the Carpathia was coming our way and giving her speed. I noticed as I came back that they were putting up the women and the children in the lifeboats.
The ship's band, conducted by Mr. Hartley, whose name will be remembered always as one of the greatest heroes of the Titanic, assembled on one of the decks, and while the boats were being lowered, played selections from operas and the latest melodies. That merry music floating out above the quiet waters under the star-strewn sky set the keynote to this great melody of spiritual devotion to honor and duty. Let us look now at some of the single figures in this deadly drama.
Colonel Astor, the American millionaire,
was returning from his honeymoon. He'd given a helping hand with the boats and had spoken words of courage and good cheer to those who seemed frightened. Then he stood for a moment by the side of his beautiful bride.
I heard Colonel Astor tell his wife that he would meet her in New York. They exchanged an affectionate farewell, but no more affectionate than that of a couple just separating for a week instead of eternity.
As the boats with the women went away from the side of the ship, Colonel Astor stood for a moment at the salute. He called out a last farewell to his wife.
Goodbye, dearie. I will join you later.
Then he turned calmly and lit a cigarette, and leaned over the rails, staring through the darkness.
Major Butt, President Taft's aide-de-camp,
had been close to Colonel Astor and had behaved with the chivalry and the quiet, cheerful courage of a gallant gentleman.
He was very calm. He gave his orders coolly and pacified men who were inclined to be panicky. I last saw him by the rail looking into the water.
Miss Young.
I was on the last boat that put off from the Titanic. I knew Major Butt in Washington, and we resumed our acquaintance on the Titanic. He was so cool and collected that he inspired all who came in contact with him with courage. He helped me to my seat in the lifeboat as coolly as if he were handing me to a chair in a drawing room. And when the boat was lowered, he stood on the deck and, taking off his hat, said,
"Goodbye,"
and smilingly waved his hand to me. He stood upon that watery deck as our boat pulled off, and the very last I saw of this brave man was while he stood there, waving his hat and smiling.
One of the stewards who was instrumental in getting the people away in the boat says that Mr. Benjamin Guggenheim, the New York banker, was offered a place in one of the lifeboats, but he refused, saying,
I will not go. No woman shall remain unsaved because I was a coward.
Mr. Guggenheim gave the steward a message for his wife, which was afterwards delivered.
If I don't turn up, tell my wife that I have done the best I could.
He was one of those who went down, but he and a friend found time to return to their cabins and put on evening dress. When the steward expressed his amazement, Mr. Guggenheim smiled and said,
If we have to die, we will die like gentlemen.
The men all stood away and waited in absolute silence, some leaning against the end railings of the deck, others pacing slowly up and down. The boats were then swung out and lowered from A deck. When they were level with B deck, where all the women were collected, the women got in quietly, with the exception of some who refused to leave their husbands. In some cases, they were torn from their husbands and pushed into the boats, but in many instances they were allowed to remain, since there was no one to insist that they should go. Looking over the side, one saw the boats from aft already in the water, slipping quietly away into the darkness. Presently, the boats near me were lowered, with much creaking as the new ropes slipped through the pulleys and blocks down the 90 feet which separated them from the water. An officer in uniform came up as one boat went down and shouted out,
When you're afloat, row round to the companion ladder and stand by the other boats for orders.
Aye, aye, sir.
But I don't think any boat was able to obey the order. For when they were afloat and had their oars at work, the condition of the rapidly settling liner was much more apparent. In common prudence, the sailors saw that they could do nothing but row from the sinking ship, and so save at any rate some lives. They no doubt anticipated that the suction from such an enormous vessel would be more than usually dangerous to the crowded boat, which was mostly filled with women.
And we rowed away from the ship as fast as we could, because one has to do that, because I believe the suction when a vessel goes down is absolutely enormous. And we rowed away, and I didn't close my eyes at all. I saw that ship sink. And I saw that ship break in half. And for so many years, people have argued with me about that. But now at last, it has been proven beyond all doubt that she did break in half. I know she did, I saw her. And the forepart went down nose first, and the stern of that ship stood up in the water for quite a long time, or it seemed a long time to me, and then keeled over.
As the Titanic slipped slowly and remorselessly into the ocean, the Leyland liner Californian was standing quietly 10 miles away. She was blocked in by the ice and had been stopped since the Titanic arrived. Like the Titanic, the Californian was a passenger ship, but unlike the Titanic, she was only 6,000 tons and wasn't even carrying any passengers at the time. By 11:30, the Californian's wireless operator, Cyril Evans, was exhausted. He shut up his set for the night and flopped onto his bunk to flip through a magazine before finally turning in. Back on the bridge, apprentice James Gibson was intrigued by some lights out to sea. They hadn't moved for over an hour. Were they sending Morse? He tried to reply, but soon gave up. Second Officer Stone was up on the bridge too. It was strange, he thought, that a ship should send up rockets at night. Stone and Gibson counted 5 up to 12:55. Gibson tried the lamp again, but again he gave up. Raising his glasses, he spotted a 6th rocket burst into the sky. Second Officer Stone whistled down the speaking tube to Captain Stanley Lord, who was sleeping in his uniform in the chart room. Stone told him about the rockets.
Are they company signals?
I don't know, but they appear to me to be white rockets.
The captain told him to go on Morsey. A while later, Stone passed the glasses to Gibson.
Have a look at her now. She looks very queer out of the water. Her lights look queer.
A little later,
A ship is not going to fire rockets at sea for nothing. Call the captain and tell him that the ship is disappearing in the southwest and that she has fired altogether 8 rockets.
Gibson hurried down to the chart room where Captain Lord was asleep on a couch. He told him what they had seen.
Were they all white rockets?
Yes.
What time is it?
5 minutes past 2 by the wheelhouse clock.
Captain Lord rolled over and went back to sleep. By 20 minutes to 3, the lights had gone.
And of course, there are still threats of legal things even these days about whether the ship that was so close to us was the Californian or not. I mean, I saw that ship. It's terribly close. Now, the sort of thing that I must emphasize is people say this, say that, say the other. Now asking me, was that the Californian you saw? I cannot possibly tell you. I've always been told, with Board of Trade inquiries and everything that went, that was the Californian. But I, Eva Hart, can't make that statement, but I don't know. I mean, short of going up to the ship and looking at the name on it, you wouldn't know. I can't think that the 2 big inquiries, one in America and one here, which were held at the time, would have been wrong about that. But they're trying to say now, of course, that it was so, as you know. But I refuse to say that it was. I don't know. And the other thing I'm saying is that I didn't see a ship 19 miles away. I saw a ship that was so close, and they said at the time it was less than 9 miles away. Now they're trying to say it was 19. I saw it. You know, it wasn't just lights on the horizon. You could see it was a ship. And I saw our rockets being fired, which that ship must have seen. Well, this inquiry says that they did see it, but they didn't think it was a portent of danger. But I would have thought in the middle of the Atlantic, in the middle of the night, that rockets must mean trouble.
And the band played on. The Titanic's musicians have become as great a part of the story as the iceberg itself. History depicts them up on the deck, playing on with heroic dignity as the waters finally closed around the doomed liner. Wallace Hartley assembled his men in the first-class lounge and struck up a little ragtime. And as the great ship slipped still deeper and deeper into the water, the 8 musicians moved out onto the boat deck and played on louder into the starry night. People streamed out and on to the few remaining lifeboats, and with a rise of terror and emotions, Hartley and his men kept firmly to the steady ragtime beat. Then, with just 5 minutes to go, Wallace Hartley tapped his violin. The ragtime stopped, and the Episcopalian hymn, Autumn, rang out into the ice-cold night. But legend has it that Hartley and his men concluded with "Nearer, my God, to thee." Newspapers and magazines published the words and music, surrounded by solemn portraits of the brave musicians themselves. It looked and sounded right. Some of the survivors were sure it was the case, despite 2 different settings of the hymn, reproduced with equal confidence.
Well, there's no question about the fact that they played, and there's no question about the fact that after we were down on the water and they were playing, they played one version of the hymn, Nearer My God to Thee, of which there are 3. I've had this out so many times. And the one they played was the one that was played in church some months after, when I was with my grandmother, and I was so frightened I came out of church, I ran out, I knew the tune so well. But they won't have it, the Americans won't have it. People say, no, it's not it, but it was just ragtime, but it wasn't. But we were down on the ocean by then. Oh yes, I could hear it, yes. I could.
Nearer, my God, to thee, nearer to thee. Ere though it be a cross that raiseth me, still all my song shall be nearer, my God, to thee, nearer to thee. Then let the wave appear, steps unto heaven. All that thou sends to me in mercy give. Angels to beckon me, nearer, my God, to thee, nearer to thee.
Well, I have a recollection of being absolutely petrified on a dark night with a sinking ship and people screaming. There wasn't any panic until the lifeboats left, and then there was panic galore. We were down on the ocean. We could hear them running about on the decks and screaming. You can imagine people came up from their cabin, went onto the deck, no lifeboat, tearing around the other side. That's when the panic was there. There wasn't any panic at the time I got in the lifeboat because there weren't enough people up there. And there were enough people there to just get into the lifeboats. But after that, then the others started coming up from their cabins, and there were no boats. Gosh, there was panic. We could hear it. Definitely. But the most dreadful sound of all is the sound of people drowning. The screams. Absolutely ghastly. My mother used to say sometimes, she couldn't get me to talk about it for years, but if ever anyone did talk to me, I said that, she used to say yes. But do you remember the silence that followed it? And that's quite right. It says the whole world stood still that night. Once the lights had gone, the ship had gone, the sound had gone. Oh, it was dreadful. I can only tell you that I'm a terrible coward, and I never look at pictures of it going down, ever. When I get various books and things, I turn that page over very quickly. In fact, if you look through some of my Titanic books, you'll probably find a piece of paper slotted in that page, but I can't bear to look at it. It was I suppose it was a microcosm, is that the word? Looking at it from low down on the sea, it was dreadful. I don't like looking at pictures of ships at all. I don't like pictures of the Titanic particularly because I can see it happening, you know.
Which brings us to the death of Captain Smith. Once again, the facts are not clear, and we are left with the legends. But even the legends do not agree.
3:11 a.m. Reuters telegram. Suicide of Titanic captain. New York, April 18. Titanic survivors state the captain of the Titanic shot himself on the bridge. Reuters.
Captain Smith stood on the bridge, a calm, grave figure, conscious that the end was near. 2 words came down from him to the people who were crowding forward.
Be British!
It was a call to the old traditions of our race and manhood.
I saw Captain Smith alongside a raft. There's the skipper, I yelled. Give him a hand. They did, but he shook himself free and shouted to us,
Goodbye, boys! I'm going to follow the ship!
That was the last we saw of our skipper.
I saw him swim back onto the sinking ship. He went down with it in my sight.
The captain's last act was to save a little child. Soon after Mr. Williams had been hauled into the boat, Captain Smith swam upward, supporting a baby in his left arm and swimming with his right.
Take the child!
He gasped. A dozen hands reached forth to grasp the baby, which was taken into the boat. Then they tried to pull the captain into the boat, but he refused.
What became of Murdoch?
He asked. Someone answered that he was dead.
The captain released his grasp of the gunwale and slowly sank before our eyes.
Someone somewhere has vouched for each of these myths, but which, if any, is nearest to truth, we will never really know. At 3:30 a.m., the rockets of the Cunard liner Carpathia were sighted by the survivors in the lifeboats. After picking up Jack Phillips's distress call, the 12,000-tonner immediately about turned and raced 58 miles from the south to the Titanic's last radioed position. Her usual speed was 14 knots, but that night she did 17. The Carpathia arrived with the dawn.
And we were picked up, as you know, in the morning by this little ship, the Carpathia. And the rescue of people from lifeboats in mid-ocean is quite a terrifying thing. These little boats, shall we say, draw up alongside, for want of a better expression, to what looks like an enormous vessel. She was quite a small vessel, the Carpathia, but she looked big from there. And then how do you get on board? You don't have a gangplank like you do when you're ashore. And so they opened a sort of, I don't know whether the word is right, a hatch in the side of the ship where the luggage used to be laid. And they threw down rope ladders, and people like my mother and other grown-ups had to climb up in mid-ocean up a swaying rope ladder, which she said was the most terrifying thing. The sailor behind us sort of holding on. And then what can the children do? We couldn't climb up a rope ladder. So they got these big luggage nets, and the mesh is very wide apart. It's quite a big mesh. Children would have slipped through it, snorted. Anyway, our legs and feet would have gone. So each child was put in a sack. And I remember being petrified when I was put in that sack, and it was tied around, and the sack full of these children were put into these huge nets, and quite safely, of course, all on board. But that really was quite terrifying. And having got on board, of course, I couldn't find my mother. And I didn't find her for hours, eventually. And I'm quite sure one of the most pathetic things must have been the whole of the next day, how these poor women, such as my mother, roamed about the ship looking to see if they could see the husband they left behind. But never found anyone.
Of the 2,206 passengers and crew, 703 survived. A total of 1,503 were lost. The Carpathia, with its tragic cargo, steamed to New York, and the legend of the Titanic became public property.
New line of Titanic, it's an iceberg.
Wreck of the Titanic.
Now the Titanic went down.
That's the story of the Titanic.
And we just went to New York in this little ship, and then my mother's first words were when she landed, "How soon can I go home?" We came straight back out.
Lists of the Titanic's lost and saved were eventually posted outside the White Star Line's offices at Southampton. The dead were revered at a grand and solemn memorial service at St. Paul's Cathedral.
Though lights are wanderer, the sun gone down, darkness be over me, my restless soul, yet in my dreams I'll be nearer, my God, to thee, nearer to thee.
Can you imagine what would have happened if the Titanic had gone down today? Can you imagine the outrage and the media furor that would have gone up? There would have been accusations, there would have been finger-pointing, there would have been litigation on an international, practically a cosmic scale, wanting to know who was to blame and how did it happen. But in 1912, things were very different. Yes, of course there were inquiries. There was an inquiry in America, and there was another one back in the United Kingdom. People, of course, did want to know what happened. But the media concentrated not so much on the loss of life and the responsibility. They focused on something different. They were concerned with how the Anglo-Saxon races, and the British in particular, had borne up and maintained the stiff upper lip. The British knew how to die. And that's why whenever today you look at any memorial to Captain Smith, you look at any popular media coverage of the sinking and aftermath of the Titanic, what they concentrate on is not blame, is not upon death, and is not upon responsibility. What they focus upon is the dying words of Captain Edward John Smith of the Titanic. Be British.
There was no borough council move for any kind of monument to Captain Smith in Stoke,
and it was left to a friend, William Hampton, to raise money for a plaque, which was sited in Hanley Town Hall. As for the statue, Bishop Boyd Carter raised an appeal and commissioned Lady Kathleen Scott, wife of Robert Fulton Scott, Scott of the Antarctic, who had also died in 1912, to make the statue. It was unveiled in Lichfield in 1914. Lichfield was chosen because it was seen to be more accessible and more convenient, and Stoke had already had its plaque in the town hall. The unveiling took place on a lovely summer's day on July 29, 1914. Present were Lady Scott, Millicent, Duchess of Sutherland, Helen Smith, the captain's daughter, and Mrs. Eleanor Smith, the captain's widow. The Duchess of Sutherland gave an emotional speech.
We all pass through this world, partly masked, partly misjudged. It seems as if our real temptations, capabilities, and qualities are unknown to so many, until at last, in face of some crucial situation in life, at the command of our unbearing taskmaster, Death, we are truly revealed, and our characters stand as they should stand. Do not grieve too much that Captain Smith lies in the mysterious sea, which has swallowed silently many of the great, many of those we love, many of our darling dead. My friends, let us take great heart in this solemn scene, and renew our courage, our own powers of self-sacrifice more strongly, for there hang over us menacing clouds that may call for our courage and powers of self-sacrifice. Let us see to it that we may never be lacking in that supreme hour. I ask Miss Smith if she will now unveil the statue.
Notably absent from the proceedings were members of the South Staffordshire Regiment, who should have been here, but were called away on military manoeuvres. For within a week of the unveiling of a statue to the captain of the so-called unsinkable Titanic, the Great War, the so-called War to End Wars, was to begin.
I should think I've looked at that statue thousands of times. Just a feeling of nostalgia. Just look at that and think, he's a man who I would have loved to have met. Of course, my age and his age, that wouldn't have been possible.
I entirely agree with my dear Dr. Ballard's words. He said the whole thing was a tribute to man's arrogance. And I agree with that. The man can be so arrogant as to build something and claim that it is undestroyable, if you like. It's the most arrogant thing to say. True, if the Titanic had struck rocks, or a tempest and storm sunk, that would be one thing, but this was a ship that needn't have lost lives. Because I'm quite sure that it's not too big a statement to make, to say that it is the one disaster for which there was no excuse for anyone to die. No one should have died. Had she had enough lifeboats for 2.5 hours in a very smooth sea, nobody would have died. And one life is worth more than a whole ship, surely. That is what I saw, that is what I remember. And there are hardly any of us now to share this memory, of course. I'm the only living survivor now that can remember it and get about, so to speak. I don't think there's anyone that can really tell the whole story of it, except himself.
This was the cry of the ship going down. Every man was hasty at his post. Captain and crew, when they knew the war, saving the women and children apart. British is the cry to everyone, and though fate has approved unkind, so that you are willing with a penny or a shilling for those of danger, behold